Welcome to the Getting to Know Your Contract mini series. In this video, this is going to be one of multiple videos where I'm going to be talking about closing costs and title insurance and survey and all those other things. Why? Because they're detailed, kind of like the financing section was pretty detailed. First thing that I'm going to cover in this video is the closing cost to be paid, the traditional closing cost for both seller and buyer, and reminding you that this is an option as to who pays what under the contract. Okay, so first of all, traditionally, the seller pays for the following. The seller pays for the doc stamps on the deed. That is the sales tax on the sale. That's what doc stamps are on the deed, right, to get it recorded. The owner's policy and charges. So the seller is generally paying for the title insurance policy that protects the buyer. That's called an owner's policy. Any association estoppel fees, any recording fees for things that need to cure title. So there was a corrective deed that needed to be recorded, a quitclaim deed that needed to be recorded, all of that. Any seller's attorney's fees, the seller side closing fees, title search fees are generally seller side things. Municipal lien search fees are seller side things. If there is a seller who is a foreign national or a business that is owned by a foreign national, you're probably going to have FIRPTA withholding. Just know that those FIRPTA withholding things are going to be considered closing costs on the seller side of the form. And there's a new as is requirement for holdback thing. So in an as-is contract, the seller has an obligation to maintain the property the way that it is with ordinary wear and tear accepted, right? If they can't, if something happens, right, then the title company is required to hold back 125% of the estimated cost to meet that as-is maintenance requirement. And it gets escrowed, okay? And if the actual cost, not the estimated 125%, but if the actual cost exceeded that escrow amount, under this contract, this 2021 contract, that seller is required to pay those actual costs. So be aware, right? Unused portions of what's escrowed back for maintenance requirements, as is maintenance requirements, are returned to the seller. But if it costs more than what's been escrowed back, that is not going to be given to the seller, and the seller is going to be contractually liable for paying for those actual costs. So be aware of that. Okay, costs that are traditionally paid by the buyer. The lender's policy, if you have a lender, okay, taxes and recording fees for notes and mortgages, essentially to do the financing that you did. The recording fee for the deed. So not the doc stamps on the deed, but the recording fee for the deed. Surveys, the HOA or condominium, like new member fees. They call them sometimes transfer fees or application fees. It could be municipal lien search if the buyer selected to have an additional type of search done. Anything that has to do with the loan, appraisals, inspection fees, the buyer side of the closing, which sometimes is called buyer's attorney's fees, hazard insurance, the owner's hazard insurance policy premium, anything like that must be paid by the buyer traditionally. So just be aware that these are the traditional buyer and seller costs, but they can all be negotiated. They just have to be clearly and specifically stated in the contract in order to be negotiated.